Hello, folks. Welcome back to Unfinished Business. Guess what? You're in luck because you've managed to catch us in a deep dive. But before I introduce the movie we're going to talk about, I am your host, Jeff Gallashaw, and with me, as always, is co-host Andre Joseph of AJ Epyx Productions. Happy holidays to all of you out there. This week, we are going to talk about a little 1987 classic that was a moneymaker and continued the success of its star, Michael J. Fox. That's right, folks. I'm talking about The Secret of My Success, which is about a small-town farm boy who comes to the big city seeking riches, expecting that his uncle will give him his dream job. His uncle instead has him work the mailroom, and he works all these menial jobs until he finds a way to find an office where he uses his financial know-how to be a, I guess, stockbroker that nobody knew about. And he manages to find love kind of twice. Well, he finds sex, but then he finds love with the girl of his dreams at the company, who just so happens to be his uncle / boss's mistress. But it's okay because he's already accidentally slept with his uncle's wife. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about my history with this film. I've always looked up to Michael J. Fox because not only was he this like TV star who went on to be a movie star, but he also was of limited height. So, you didn't really see too many leading men who were short. It was like, him and Danny DeVito, So, I mean, he's not that short, but, and what I liked about him in this role was he was kind of playing Alex B. Keaton, but not exactly, because, this Alex P. Keaton has sex. So, first of all, and, it felt a little dirtier than the things we had seen him up to at this point. And it's like I lived in New York, but I had never at this point, because I saw this movie in theaters and I was 9 years old, but I had never seen the New York depicted in this film. The skyscrapers, the businesses, the homes. It made New York look grand the way, I guess, out-of-towners look at New York still. And I always admired this film for that, which is why I'm talking about it on Deep Dive. It paints New York as a wonderland. A little stereotypical as I'm older now, but at the time it was just like so amazing to me. And, so that's why I always have a soft spot for this film. Also, the fact that this film kind of plays like a screwball comedy of, the 1940s with, the revolving lovers, the classic mix-up like, I'm secretly working for my uncle's company. Oh, he almost discovers me, but I get out of it this way. And, of course, being friends with the guys low on the totem pole actually ends up paying off for him in the end. Before I go on, though, let me ask you, what was your first experience with this film?
So for me, I mean, Michael J. Fox is a hero of mine. I grew up on all the Back to the Future movies as a kid, watched them constantly on video, and had seen part 2 and 3 in the theaters. I'd seen like The Hard Way, I'd seen Doc Hollywood. I never saw Secret of My Success until maybe like the late 90s when it was on TV. I think it was on TBS or it might have been on HBO. I always, like as a kid, I used to see the video cover in the store with him, on the champagne bottle in front of New York. And I always thought that was like a cool image, but I never, for whatever reason, actually went and saw the movie up until that point. And every time I saw it on TV, I always saw the part with him in the limo being seduced by his aunt and the "Oh Yeah" song playing from Ferris Bueller, which is like the one thing that I think everybody remembers about that movie. But yeah, I mean, my impression of it was always that it was like this screwball comedy, but a perfect vehicle for him to do at that time, because you got to remember he was at the height of his game with the Back to the Future movies, and Family Ties was like one of the number one shows in America. And it also kind of paralleled his life too, because when he started out, he was this Canadian kid who moved to Los Angeles with no money, was barely surviving on his rent, didn't have a phone, and was lucky when he got the job on Family Ties. Like, he had nothing else going for himself. And like Meredith Baxter would have to drive him from his apartment to the set every day. And by the time Back to the Future came out, he had his own house, he had a Ferrari, like he was a huge success. So I could see where he really wanted to do a movie like this. And, you know, also speak of the fact that it's a screwball comedy from like the 40s. I think it might have been a remake of an earlier film. I don't remember the name of it. But the writer, A.J. Crothers, was a Disney writer. So I'm wondering if he wrote this as a Disney movie and it got into turnaround. Because then the writers of Top Gun, Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr., ended up rewriting it. And they changed certain elements, I guess, to make it a little less dirty. Because in the original script, Helen Slater's character was supposed to be a prostitute.
Yeah.
And supposedly, I guess they thought, you know, Michael J. Fox is a very squeaky clean guy. So they made it like a secretary, well, not a secretary, but like a colleague. And then the prostitute type of stuff went to the aunt character. So that's kind of how that all sort of changed up. The thing that always weirded me out, though, about this film was Helen Slater, because she is incredibly taller than Michael J. Fox. And yet they try to do stuff where at times they try to play it like they're at their same height, or he's sitting down or she's sitting down. And she made notes about this in some interview that she did years ago, and made it seem like that was like the one detriment. Like, she had fun working with him, but the height issue was always the weirdest thing. And I think they wanted Christy McNichol to play that part, but she had some personal issues at the time, so they didn't cast her. And Helen Slater, I guess because she had done Ruthless People, like, oh yeah, she could do comedy. And they just put her in because she's good looking and she's humorous. But that's the one thing that kind of takes away from it. It's just like, I could see the attraction, but it's just so weird with the height difference between them.
Leave us short guys alone. Well, yes, it was noted that they always would have to, like, you know, adjust the camera so that any kissing scenes, you know, you'd have to make them look on the level. But actually, surprisingly, this movie is supposedly based on Steven Spielberg when he used to sneak onto Universal's a lot, and he took over empty office and used it as his production office. And, you know, when he was first starting out. But again, that's the story. I don't know how true that is, but it all leads back to Spielberg. And this film, I mean, the actors in it, you don't see this quality of actor anymore, because, you know, most of them were like theater actors. You know, and you had, oh, hold on, I wrote down the names just so I can. Robert Jordan, come on, character actor extraordinaire, usually villains.
And he's a real scumbag here. He was good.
Hey, I have no problem with his performance. I mean, and I like that he's also comedic in it, you know? It's not one of those, like, typical, I'm just all evil. You have him sniveling at one point towards the end and begging for sex in another scene, but treats everybody like shit, even when he's, like, having all, like, I guess his cronies, they all have to have the same pulse when exercising on the roof. You know, like, little things like that from the 80s I miss. You know, you have Margaret Whitton.
Yeah.
Come on. Now, she has had a historic career. Some of you might remember her from The Man Without a Face. She played the boy's mother. And, you know, unfortunately, later in her career, she kind of got typecast in those roles because she was in Big Girls Don't Cry, They Get Even, same type of role.
But you're forgetting, like, the biggest role she ever did.
Are you talking Major League?
Yes.
Where she's
owner,
the bitch owner who, as they win games, they strip off her thing because her character is a former stripper. I was hoping you weren't going to say Major League 2.
So, Major League 2, believe it or not.
You and Omar Epps. Maybe Charlie Sheen. But, you know, this to me, out of all the movies I've seen her in, this is her best role because she has the most to do. She can be funny, she can be dramatic, and she can be sexy too. And I think that's why also after a certain amount of time, like after The Man Without a Face, she pretty much stopped doing movies and went back to theater because, again, she was always typecast in the same roles. But then you have one of my favorite character actors, Christopher Murny. Who now mostly does voiceover work.
They call me God.
Exactly. Come on. You all know him. If you're a faithful member of this show, you have watched The Last Dragon. He's the villain, Eddie Arcadian. I mean, he's the man behind Show Enough, But here, playing the mailroom guy, the only other true villain of this movie, because he's always trying to catch him and always missing him. And he just automatically dislikes Michael J. Fox from the first meeting for no reason. I
would want to see more of in movies. I feel like we never get enough.
Exactly. Even in The Last Dragon, with a film full of outsized characters, he makes his presence felt against Show Enough of all people, And the only other thing I ever remember him physically being in is an episode of Kate and Allie where he was even more memorable than the stars in, that episode.
He was on The Equalizer also, but he was like an informant.
Oh, okay. But I'm just like, now that is an actor I wish I would have seen more of. But I mean, he's happy with what he's doing in voiceover acting. He definitely has the voice and talents for it.
Yeah.
And let's see what else. Oh, Cindy Crawford has a cameo in the opening credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a big montage of New York.
Yeah, so it's like blink and you miss it. Let's see, what else did I write down? Oh, while he was filming this, he was also filming the Paul Schrader movie, Light of Day, a movie we have to talk about someday. So he was doing both these movies, and then as soon as he finished this film, he started the 5th season of Family Ties. So he was really working. But what I admire about this is that this was his first, as with the title, this was his first solo success. Like Back to the Future had this time traveling angle that, could have interested anybody, any audience member, but it also helped that, recognizable face, Michael J. Fox. This film was purely built on his name, more or less, and and directed by Herbert Ross. It's he's a classic director, but this is probably one of my favorite films that he ever made, next to Boys on the Side. Mm-hmm. But that's another story. But this film, again, I just guess, even though Michael J. Fox was a TV star, this was, to me, even though Back to the Future was already hit, this was his coming out party. This is like, I am a bona fide star. I can get a movie made with my name alone at this point. Mm-hmm. And, I just feel like I guess I've always missed that Michael J. Fox, when he was considered an icon in movies, it was like after The Hard Way never was the same, He
didn't have that safety net after Family Ties ended. It just seemed like, that was over. There was not going to be more Back to the Future movies. And he tried to fall back into doing comedies like this, but not as successful. He tried to do For Love or Money as sort of like a semi sequel to Secret of My Success, and it didn't land.
It didn't land as strong. It didn't help that he had a much younger co-star, but she was his own height. But it had its charms, but not as strong a charm as this one. And then you have movies like Life with Mikey. He tried, but I think that was partially what audiences got kind of tired of him being in these kind of like ho-hum comedies, where it just always seemed like he's trying to make a comeback, even though Greedy was a really nice try. And, because at least he surrounded himself with other fellow comedic and classic actors. But, this will always, to me, be one of the crown jewels in his crown. And this is one of the films that I always will be well will be well remembered, because it's not just him that makes this movie magical. Again, it's the cast, it's the story, it's the scenes, they all work together, even though this could have been easily a throwaway comedy, that was forgotten. It's obviously it's a film of its own time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well,
just listen to that David Foster score, which I like. I mean, he was coming off of St. Elmo's Fire, but it definitely, like, with the montage scenes, feels like this is pure 80s, down to that Night Ranger theme song, which I think is pretty kick-ass for that day.
I mean, you have this business that has all these employees, stockbrokers. You have Fred Gwynn trying to take over it at the end. And, basically a corporate takeover. You have the lady who, I don't remember her name, but did the voice on Big Bang Theory of Howard's mother as his secretary. You have John Pankow as the mailroom guy.
Who I never recognized until I saw To Live and Die in L.A.
You really?
No, I didn't even recognize him in Barry's Not Included. I'm like, that's the same guy.
Oh, yes, John Pankow, who I will always remember for the series I'm not that big a fan of, Mad About You, too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's been in many classics, and this was like, not the start of his career, but, towards, as it was gaining traction. And, unfortunately, he never got roles like these ever again, But, I'm trying to see if I have anything written down.
It made more money than a lot of films that came out that year that had sequels. It made more money than Predator, Lethal Weapon, Dirty Dancing. Like, this is crazy that a film like this did as well as it did. There was talk of a sequel at one point, but I think either Michael didn't want to do it, there probably weren't scripts. I think there was a lawsuit with the producers over profits. But it never materialized, and I don't know where you would have taken it. Like,
exactly, I was like, "Where's this gonna go? What now?"
And try to challenge him for his job, or there'd be another takeover. I don't know what you would do.
It would have to be like he becomes a Richard Jordan character, and we start anew all over again. That's the only way I could think. It would be like it would. I just like how every successful movie, no matter what, they're always like, there was almost a sequel, and it's just like, yeah, some of those I can understand, but others it's like, how? This would have been like one of those how, unless it was going to be like Short Circuit 2, where we take one character supporting and then put them as the star of the new film. Like, oh, John Pankow and him and Margaret Whitton's relationship, as he tries to start a new business.
Wouldn't be as fun.
And, like I said, this is just like one of those classics. I'm not going to say, it's going to rock your cinematic world, but it's something that's nice to take a look back on, see the constructions, see the star quality, see the acting, and just be like, it all managed to fit together. And it never feels overproduced. It doesn't feel like a studio's hand is behind this at all.
It has some cinematography in there too. It was like Woody Allen's guy that did it, and you could see like different shots that look pretty artistic, like around the city, or the montage where he's like hooking up with Helen Slater and they go on to the ferry. That was some nice stuff for that period.
Well, I mean, and of course the seduction scene that has the Jaws theme. And
yeah, well, okay, so there are those cliches too, where you could almost tell like they put a temp track on there when they were editing, and they said, let's just leave the temp track as is. The Jaws theme, the Yellow song, like, people are gonna love that stuff.
But yeah, and he didn't return to New York again till Bright Lights, Big City, and that fiasco, which was more of his trying drama next to Light and Day.
Changing directors, and they tried to get the drugs out, and then they put the drugs back. We'll do a deep dive on that one day.
Yeah, that movie's just a mess. And then he returned to New York once again with a little better material for The Hard Way, and and then Life with Mikey, and then for
yeah, then he moved to New York, I think, because of this movie.
All right, he's still here. And we still love him,
I love that man, no matter what he's going through. And I know he said he was probably going to retire at this point. I understand it. but we love that guy no matter what. He is still awesome.
And I've seen Light of Day, and you can still do no wrong in my eyes. Michael J. Fox. The other movies of his career we have to talk about. But this is one of the successes, thankfully.
Yeah, one of the few successes at that time.
Yep. So that ends this week's business. But we always have unfinished business, even when we're deep in the dive. And so I say season's greetings and see you next time, folks.